Welcome back to Chris and Retro. You'll notice the home studio has changed quite a bit here, and I'm in the middle of transition. I decided to switch things up a little bit, but I still haven't decided what I want to do here. So I figured I'd get a video out to you tonight. Somewhat as a promotional video for some work that we're doing in the studio, and also to share with you something that was an observation today that I thought was really eye-opening to me and powerful, and I thought I'd pass it along to you. But first, I want to make an announcement. We have an upcoming guest. His name's Chad Marks. He is with the Blood on the Razor Wire TV YouTube channel. Also doing some work with his business called Freedom Fighters, where he does some paralegal work for those that are incarcerated and works on their life sentences to get them free, based on criteria of what looks like their rehabilitation. So it's a pretty powerful program that he's working on. I was able to get him on as a guest. He's a local Rochester native, and had a really good conversation with him today in the studio. So the next week or so, we'll probably drop that episode. And I'm really looking forward to getting it out to you. Also, along with that, my fiance, Samantha Engelbrecht, who has been on this show, is also a guest on his show. And her story is pretty powerful, as you've heard it here. But she approaches it from a slightly different angle on that one. And I really feel like it should reach the hearts and minds of some young woman that's out there that might be putting herself in harm's way. I don't think that we realize, and as we talk about in this channel, the unintended consequences of our high-risk living. And I think that Sam does an outstanding job in that interview of demonstrating that, and how much work it takes to get on the other side. We talked today in that interview, and this idea of the grind, the grind now, to keep ourselves out of trouble and to work harder to make opportunity for ourselves is a lot easier than the grind on the other side of trying to recover our lives. And I certainly have noticed that for myself. That leads into the subject. So not to overplay Blood Under Razor Wire TV, but because we've had that connection with him today, and he was such a good guest, he had also shared with me one of his guests that he had on the show. And that leads to my topic tonight: forgiveness. I think that we look at forgiveness in a lot of different angles. So, I think that we want to be forgiven every time that we do something wrong. I know for me, it's much easier for me to want to be forgiven by somebody for something I've done than it is for me to forgive somebody else for what they've done. A lot of times I'll forgive people with qualifications too. I'll forgive them to get through this moment. I'll feel that, I've given them a pass more than forgiveness, but I'm more than likely going to hold that around and bring that up at a later date. It's a real flaw of mine, and it is something that, I question my ability to forgive people sometimes. And so I saw an example today that really just was powerful to me, and I could tell based on this example, it was not an easy process. So Chad had on his show, his guest happened to be a person that had been a very good friend of his growing up. He had taken him in. The kid had some drug issues. He'd brought him into his home, provided work for him, provided him transportation, and the guy stole from him. Now, Chad was living hard at that point in time, was a drug dealer and allegedly one of the top guys in that area of the city. So he had a lot of resources, and this individual took advantage of that. Not only did he take advantage of it, he became an informant for the federal government and got a 40-year sentence laid on top of Chad based on his testimony and some other things. Now, Chad was not exempt from that. He did all the things, but this person wore a wire and despite the charity, flipped the script on him. So, and you'll hear more about that in the interview that we have with Chad. However, in this interview, the interview that he had done, and I'll share the link to the video in the description of this one, so you can actually watch the whole thing. But I'm going to characterize what I saw so that hopefully you go take a look at it just from my viewpoint. So as the story goes, Chad had been out. He was driving down the street, and he'd seen this gentleman twice since he'd been out of prison. Now, while he's facing 40, he got 18. So there was some grace that took 20 years off of it, but he got 18 years. When he was released, he had seen this individual, and I guess I can't recall, but I think he had some moderate interaction with him. No problems, but really was a challenge seeing him. The second time he was driving down through an area on the northwest side of our city, and he was flagged down by this gentleman, and the gentleman was asking for help from him. Now, when they connected, the person that he was talking to felt fearful that the retaliation was coming for putting this man away for 18 years. And you can imagine why. I mean, when he went away, he was a street boss and he was out there doing things that were pretty violent, and he was living a violent lifestyle and a high risk lifestyle. And the consequences for crossing him were grave. And so this individual felt like he was, meet his demise by seeing him. Instead, they had a conversation because Chad has committed to his rehabilitation, and they had a conversation. And then later on that day in the gentleman's driveway, Chad did a interview with him on his show. Now, the first part, I want you to focus when you watch this interview, the first part of it. It's clear to me that forgiveness is not always easy. So here he is side by side with a person that took 18 years of his life. And instead of choking this man or doing something worse, he acknowledges his role, and at one point turned and said, "I forgive you." Now, in our lives, and I'll leave it at that with this video, but it's powerful because the tension up front, you could actually see this was not easy to give this person a pass. I mean, let's get real. Rehabilitation or not, person recovery or not, there's still some core things about who we are that don't just go away. We just learn to manage them better. So if you're a guy like Chad was, and you're sitting across somebody that did that much harm to you, it has to take an extraordinary amount of effort to not do something to this person. Instead, you could tell he was serious and he didn't do anything to him at all. He just gave him the grace, tried to understand where he was coming from, and functioned on his mission. And that's really where I'm coming to in this video today. We're all faced with situations where people have done us wrong. A wide variety of things. Hopefully it didn't throw you away for 18 years in prison. But we also, the things that sometimes people do wrong to us, we have a role. There's reasons why people do things to us. Sometimes we've harmed them to a point that they feel desperate. And they're going to lash out at us, or they're going to do something to protect themselves that could land us in bad situations. But if you've taken the step and you've decided that forgiveness was something that was on the table and something that you really desired to do, there's a few things you should consider. And one is, address your resentments before going into it. If you're forgiving somebody, you're not really forgiving them. It's just lip service. And as I described, my way of forgiving somebody might be just to give them a pass, but that's not really forgiving somebody if you haven't checked your resentments at the door. And what I mean by that is actually do an inventory of why it is that what resentments are there. Make sure you know why they are, and then why. Not trying to heal them, but why are they there? And can you proceed in a manner that's healthy for both of you to deal with this situation? Take stock of what you're gaining and losing by the current state. So if you're in a situation where you have a resentment, or you have a situation where you're not forgiving somebody, what is that doing for you? Are you winning by walking around with this burden every time you see this person? Or are you going to win more by finding a way to, in a healthy way, release that through forgiveness and moving on? I'm not suggesting a bunch of fake "I forgive yous" and stuff like that. I really don't think that's the point. It's that soul searching stuff. It's the stuff that says, okay, I really am different, and I really do want to look at this from a different lens. For those of us that are in recovery, and also for somebody like Chad who's in a rehabilitative path from criminal lives, it takes a lot for us to be so committed that we'll check ourselves at the door and do it right. And that leads to the last point, and probably the most important thing. And this really transcends fear. It transcends forgiveness. It transcends dealing with people with hidden agendas or whatever else is going on around us. Stay on your mission. Sam and I were talking just before she did this interview, and she was quite nervous, and I don't blame her. He's got a huge channel for the genre he's in. And honestly, it was a big opportunity for her to have her voice, and she's new to that type of thing and was nervous. And, one of the things that we talked about was the most important thing, and that is stay on your mission. What is your mission going into it? So the same thing goes for forgiveness. If you're forgiving somebody because it's part of the greater purpose of who you are, I think you can't go wrong. Forgiving somebody because that is a fuel for problems for you. If you don't deal with that, or it's a fuel to derail your intent and purpose in life, I think that's a good thing, and it's something you really should take a look at. But if you start focusing your life in general on your mission and who you are as a person and why you're even here in the first place, I think it makes all these other things a lot easier. Helps us deal with fear better. Helps us deal with resentments better. Things like forgiving people. All those things become stronger. And I was really moved by the video, and I was debating whether I'd share it tonight with you guys on here or not as a reaction, but you guys are going to get a lot of Chad Marks, comments from me over the next few days, just because I really believe in what he's doing. And we had a really good conversation. I was uncertain, honestly. You don't know what you're getting into when people are in these specialized prison genre type things. And we actually joked about that with some people that are out there doing work in addiction and how predatory it can be at times. This really just felt like, it was a good look for him. And it was something I really appreciated watching this video, to see somebody, which I know full well, the authentic him was having a hard time being the new him in that environment, and still knew it was the right thing. And you could almost see his burden lift in real time as he let this go. It was closure for both sides of it. I found it powerful. And what's interesting is it probably helped both have stronger days and fortified both of them on new lives and new ways of thinking and living. For your life, ponder those areas where you've held resentments, those grudges, those beefs. I've talked about beefs on here before. Those times when you're keeping it 100, you're standing strong for what you believe in, all that stuff. Those are all good things to a certain extent. But when you're holding grudges with people, do an inventory. What's the cost of that? Is that cost greater than just saying forgiving them and moving on to your next best opportunity, the next best place to put your energy and your mind? In my life, where I've been able to authentically forgive people that I've had resentments against, I can say it is a breath of fresh air, and it does add fuel to the other areas that are more beneficial for me and my growth and for the things my family needs. Between now and the next time I talk to you guys, make progress on these things, evaluate yourself, keep moving forward, make your next best decision on it. And by all means, please stay out of trouble.